Hi there, it's me, Reed.
Hi, I'm Jennifer.
Welcome.
Welcome. We're glad to be together for another Faith at Home listening practice today.
Yeah, we're doing Psalm 81 today.
So we'll be reading from the NET version and listening for a word or a phrase or an idea that stands out to us from the psalm.
The reason we're doing it is so that you can learn. This is a practice. We call this a listening practice, and you can't learn to listen without practicing. Also, practice means to do something over and over. Just something you do regularly is also a practice, which is something we're doing as well. And we think it's valuable to do this. It helps us to learn to hear God. So that's why we're doing this. In case you're wondering.
So we like to keep a few little notes for ourselves about what we hear so that over time we can pay attention for what the divine is speaking to us. So you might want something to write with and write on, or you might want to send yourself a text. That's one of my favorite ways to keep notes for myself.
Yeah, because so many of us have these devices in our pocket all the time, and it can be very useful if you use it right. Or they can be very distracting. That's the other side of it, of course.
Would you like to start the reading for today?
Sure, I'll read first.
Thank you.
So we're listening for a word or a phrase, just something that sticks out to you. Maybe an idea that isn't said directly, or maybe just something comes to your mind while you're listening. Oh, that makes me think of. And that's also, we take that as God speaking to us. So Psalm 81 in the NET version. Shout for joy to God, our source of strength. Shout out to the God of Jacob. Sing a song and play the tambourine, the pleasant-sounding harp and the 10-stringed instrument. Sound the ram's horn on the day of the new moon and on the day of the full moon when our festival begins. For observing the festival is a requirement for Israel. It is an ordinance given by the God of Jacob. God decreed it as a regulation in Joseph when God attacked the land of Egypt. I heard a voice I did not recognize. It said, I removed the burden from Joseph's shoulder. Joseph's hands were released from holding the basket. In your distress you called out, and I rescued you. I answered you from a dark thundercloud. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. I said, Listen, my people, I will warn you. O Israel, if only you would obey me. There must be no other God among you. You must not worship a foreign god. I am the Lord your God, the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people did not obey me. Israel did not submit to me. I gave them over to their stubborn desires. They did what seemed right to them. If only my people would obey me. If only Israel would keep my commands. Then I would quickly subdue their enemies and attack their adversaries. May those who hate the Lord cower in fear before God. May they be permanently humiliated. I would feed Israel the best wheat and would satisfy your appetite with honey from the rocky cliffs.
The piece that stands out to me from this song today is about obedience. And sort of that interesting contrast that I'm experiencing in my life between being aware of the desires that I maybe just have for myself and perhaps the desires that I think the Divine Family has placed in me. And through those desires, being able to obey the invitations of the Spirit in my life. And how sometimes I'm quite resistant, actually, to saying yes to God fulfilling those desires, and maybe because it's a lot of hard work. So
All right.
that's what comes up for me as we read that today.
The thing that stuck out to me was that line where I heard a voice I did not recognize. And I think that resonated with me because I went, wow, yeah. I think sometimes God speaks and I don't recognize it as God. I poo-poo it, or I say, that's just wishful thinking, or something like that. That this person, the person who wrote this psalm, said, is just talking about this kind of this idea that God is there, and sometimes God speaks and we don't even get it. I think I heard a voice, and it was plain that it's God. It goes on to make clear that it's God speaking, but sometimes we're not in that mode for listening. At least I'm not. Frequently, I'm not ready to hear God. I'm not ready to listen, and or I do hear God, and I go, no, it's not. So that was a good thing to hear for me. I was like, interesting.
As we listen through this psalm again, this time we'll pay attention for an invitation. So in our ongoing conversations with the divine, it's not just to, fill ourselves up with words, with ideas, with images, but also to call us forward to something, because that's what helps our spiritual lives to grow, that relationship between listening and action.
You read this time.
Okay. Thanks. I need some extra cues
And
today.
we'll all listen.
All right. Shout for joy to God, our source of strength. Shout out to the God of Jacob. Sing a song and play the tambourine, the pleasant sounding harp and the 10-stringed instrument. Sound the ram's horn on the day of the new moon, and on the day of the full moon, when our festival begins. For observing the festival is a requirement for Israel. It's an ordinance given by the God of Jacob. God decreed it as a regulation in Joseph when God attacked the land of Egypt. I heard a voice that I did not recognize, and it said, I removed the burden from Joseph's shoulder. Joseph's hands were released from holding the basket. In your distress you called out, and I rescued you. I answered you from a dark thundercloud. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. I said, listen, my people, I will warn you, O Israel, if only you would obey me. There must be no other God among you. You must not worship a foreign God. I am the Lord, your God, the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people did not obey me. Israel did not submit to me. I gave them over to their stubborn desires. They did what seemed right to them. If only my people would obey me. If only Israel would keep my commands. Then I would quickly subdue their enemies and attack their adversaries. May those who hate the Lord cower in fear before God. May they be permanently humiliated. I would feed Israel the best wheat and would satisfy your appetite with honey from the rocky cliffs.
I guess the invitation it was that if only my people would obey me, if only Israel would keep my commands. I mean, it goes on to promise that God will subdue their enemies and whatnot. But I guess for me, that idea, obey God's commands. I mean, okay, 10 commandments. Okay, I won't murder. I'm good. So, but in this practice we're doing here of listening, part of that is listening to God, and of course hearing God speak, and God will speak to me. Obviously, I don't think what God is saying to me necessarily has the same weight as the 10 Commandments. I should write it down for you all to obey now. No. But the God is active and working in the world, and I should listen to God and hear God. And listen to what God is saying. And God is speaking even now. And God's commands are for the moment. Some of God's commands maybe are for all time, like 10 Commandments. Or some of God's commands are for me in this moment, in this time. And I'm not so good at that. I'm not so good at listening. On the one hand, I don't hear so good. I'm a little deaf. And then on the other, sometimes I go, no, I'm good. I'm not so interested in doing what you want me to do. So I think that was the invitation, is to listen and do what God is saying. It's not easy. I mean, the psalm just talked about that. I told you what to do and you didn't do it. Well, I'm the same way. I'm the same way. So, but that was just a reminder that, God is speaking. I'm not bereft. God isn't just sort of, you got the Bible, just read the Bible and just do those things. It's more, it's deeper, it's more personal than that. So
more ongoing.
Yeah, it's continuous. It's continuous.
For me, that space where the psalm says, "Open wide your mouth and I will fill it," is what stands out to me as an invitation. And I really like the use of the word invitation. I have parts of me that are really allergic to that word obedience. Not because obedience is a bad thing. Obedience is a good thing. But sometimes obedience has been used as a weapon against me. So sometimes I'm a bit allergic to it. So I regularly find myself substituting the word obedience for invitation, which helps me to reinterpret what God's commands are for. They are invitations for my benefit, usually. Really, usually. So that open your mouth wide and I will fill it. So I feel like that's the invitation grows out of that, but I'm not sure completely what the invitation is. So as we listen together today, there's the yes, Jennifer, you are invited to open your mouth and I will fill it. I don't have a clear sense of open your mouth and I will provide food for you to eat. Open your mouth and I will provide words for you to speak. Open your mouth and I will shut it for you because now you're done speaking.
Fill it with a gag.
So I feel like there's more for me to listen to in this context, more in the invitation. And so I'll carry this psalm with me as we go about the rest of our day and listen to what the Spirit might say.
Mm-hmm. What did you hear? Did you hear anything? God was speaking. If you're deaf like me, it just takes time to learn to do this. It's not obvious. You'd think listening would be obvious, but it doesn't seem to be for me anyway.
And we can just keep practicing without unkind words to ourselves, about ourselves, or about other people. We can just keep listening and trust, have faith that God will speak to us in relationship. So thanks for being with us today. We'd love to hear from you what you hear from God in Psalm 81 today.
Yeah.
And if you decide to listen to Psalm 81 again, maybe you'd hear something different on a different day, and you could share that with us again.
Sure.
We'd be delighted to be in the conversation with you.
Yeah. Until we meet again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.